Four, three, two, one. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Arts of Data Science Happy Hour, Friday, November 11th, 2022. I don't know about where you are, but we got slammed with some snow last night. I think something like 10 inches of snow, which is nice for the Christmas season. But here in Winnipeg, where it lasts for 6 months, you're just like, damn, couldn't you just come like 1 month later? That would have been nice, just 1 month later. But Christmas vibes are nice. It's about to be Christmas sweater season. Hopefully, you guys got a chance to tune into some of the live events I did this week. Podcast. I've got a backlog of podcast episodes that will start to be released in January. Some fresh episodes for you. But in the meantime, I'm doing a bunch of live events over at DESI. I did a couple of sessions so far. Today, I was talking about EfficientNet. Kind of broke down the EfficientNet paper in as intuitive manner as I possibly could. Intuitive in the sense that it was intuitive to me. I kind of understood it, so I tried to communicate it the same way, and then showed how to implement that using the Super Gradients training library. And I'll be doing that for several papers. That's going to be kind of like the main theme over the next few months, is just looking at these machine learning papers and just distilling it down, like these deep learning papers, and distilling it down, trying to make sure I grok it and then communicate it in a way that's free of any math, and just trying to communicate the essence of what's going on. And then, of course, showing its implementation in Super Gradients. So I did like a cool little project. It was a hard project, man. It was classifying car brands, which is harder than you might think, because all cars look the same, right? Like, cars pretty much look the same. So it was a matter of trying to figure out, okay, what's the right loss function to use in this case, right? Like, is typical cross entropy going to be the right loss function? And I was collaborating with one of the my colleagues at DESI, Eugene, and he's been doing deep learning every day, all day for 5 years, and dropped some knowledge on me and said, situation like this, we want to use something like label smoothing cross entropy, because we have such kind of high overlap between features in the categories. So we went with that, and made a couple other tweaks above the baseline, which you'll have to check out by by looking at the notebook itself. But yeah, it was a great session. Hopefully you get to join in on that. Next week, I've got live sessions happening as well. 3 live events that are going to be fairly technical. I've got an event happening with Serge Massey. He's going to be in the building. We'll be talking about interpretable machine learning. Susan Shu Chang is going to be joining me. We'll be talking about deep reinforcement learning, and we'll be talking to Kate Yarkova about all things YOLO. So it's going to be a stacked week, which means I got a lot of reading to do. I got a lot of learning to do, because in order for me to be knowledgeable and make it a good Ask Me Anything, my default assumption is like nobody's going to ask a question. Everybody's going to sit silently. So that means I need to be up to speed and knowledgeable about this topic, so then I can kind of keep the conversation going and just be able to ask the dumb questions, which usually are pretty insightful questions. Shout out to everybody in the room. Restless in the building. Vin, get to see Ben Taylor back. Ben Taylor's back in action. Ben, we've got to reschedule the interview that we had scheduled previously sometime soon. I was supposed to go live with Ben about a month ago, but there's construction happening in my home that just did not finish in time, so we were not able to make that happen. But I'm looking forward to doing it. Looking forward to hearing about this next adventure too. I think you're probably still under wraps with that, but I'm sure it's gonna be a big announcement. Shout out to everybody else in the room. Sunker, what's going on? Chinazor, Vivian's in the building. If you guys watching on LinkedIn got any questions whatsoever, please do let me know. I'm happy to take all of your questions. Speaking of questions, I guess let's kick off this discussion. Last week we were talking about layoffs, right? And I've seen like a lot of posts about people, obviously people are talking about the layoffs, are talking about the struggles they're going through. I saw a really interesting post by someone, and it was kind of like an anti-layoff post, but like in a good way. They're like, oh, these people are like capable, smart people. Like, we shouldn't feel bad for them that getting laid off, because they got hired at the best of the best companies. They're probably going to get picked up again real quick. So let's kind of look forward in the future, or look towards a brighter future, and just dwell and think about, maybe talk about the prospects going forward for tech. A lot of people got laid off. What does that mean for the tech economy? Does that mean that these people get hired sooner? Does that mean that we might see more innovation, more disruption, or are we going to just see tech bros homeless on the streets now? I don't know. I'd like to kickstart that discussion. Let's go to Vin, and then maybe we'll go to Ben after that. And then if anybody else wants to chime in, please do let me know. You guys watching on LinkedIn, if you have questions or comments, as always, the chat is open. Vin, go for it.
There's some good news. There's got to be. It can't all be bad. But what people don't realize right now is that we're kind of in the beginning of layoffs. We're in phase one, even though if you're in a startup world, you're kind of into the second, sometimes third rounds of layoffs. So I want to paint a rosy and bright picture, but the reality is that we're at the beginning of this cycle, and we're probably going to be going through it for another 9 months in one way, shape, or form. And every industry that's dependent upon one of the industries that's laying off today, or one of the industries that's suffering today, is going to be laying off in 3 months or 9 months. So it's going to get worse. But the good news is we've got a lot of pent up demand that we have to work through in the system. We've got a lot of companies that haven't been able to hire, and they still have open positions. There are companies that are growing. There's small spaces here and there that are growing. But I think at some point, we start overwhelming the demand with supply, and people are going to have to pivot into other careers, which is one of the benefits of being laid off and in a tough marketplace. Is sometimes it forces you to upskill, and you've been comfortable in a role for a very long time, and now you have to look at a better role and look at, what would it take to move forward? What would it take to pivot, get promoted? Sometimes layoffs turn into promotions. Sometimes you upskill into a better job or a better industry. And the other piece of what we're seeing a lot of right now, or at least I am, is a whole lot of consultants. People are going into consulting, opening their own 1-person, 3-person shops where, them and a couple of teammates got laid off and they just start. And you can get clients pretty quickly right now, because companies, as they lay off too many people, all of a sudden they need a consultant. They need a consultant pretty quick because they realize they have some work. So there's benefits, there's upsides, there's opportunities, but also at the same time, I want to be realistic. It's going to get really rough for about 9 months.
A couple questions I'm wondering off of that. We'll get to these questions later, but I'm wondering, what will this mean for tech salaries for software engineers and data scientists in the future? And also, does this mean that people will quit doing these ridiculous ass interviews because there's demand? I don't know. Ben, let's hear from you, and then let's come back and revisit those questions. By the way, if anybody wants to chime in, Russell, Sunker, Vivian, Chinsor, if you guys want to have anything to say here, do let me know. Those watching on LinkedIn, your comments and questions are welcome as well. Go for it, Ben.
As usual, I agree with everything that Vin said. I think the only thing I would add is I think sometimes we don't realize that how necessary layoffs can be given the current environment. I like to think of a business as being an organism, and if it's sick, if there's too much burn, if things are upside down as far as the business is concerned, then of course you need to do layoffs. One of the recommendations to do layoffs once and cut once, cut deep, because when you have to do these repeat layoffs, it can definitely impact morale inside a company. So I don't think I have that much more to add about layoffs. Just if for the people that are, one quick thought on layoffs is, I think for people that are in a position right now, it's important for them to understand how their activity maps to revenue. Because I think in a lot of roles, sometimes we don't do that, whether it's evangelism or data science. And I think in this environment, you really want to fight for that. You really want to make sure that the work you're doing is mapped to short-term value for the company, because they tend to pull back on long-term initiatives. So that's the only thought there.
Yeah, I see some of these CEOs and they put out the tweets or posts on LinkedIn, and they talk about how good severance packages they're giving to their employees, and part of me is like, oh, why don't you just not lay off that many people right now? Why are you immediately laying off this many people, giving them all this money, instead of just saying, okay, let's reassess the situation, keep X amount and lay off a smaller amount. Like, how does this make sense to lay off that, that amount of people and then just give them all this kind of quote unquote free money? Any thoughts on that from anyone? I'm going to go to Vin here, but if anybody else has input, let me know.
Yeah, share price.
Share
Two
price.
words. That was it. And doing it this year means that they can write down the expenses this year when everything's terrible anyway. Like their stock price is going to get hammered no matter what. I was kind of joking about this with some folks back in March. If your earnings beat, your stock gets hammered. If you miss earnings, your stock gets hammered. If you lower guidance, your stock gets hammered. It was pretty much, this year's, if you report earnings, your stock's going to go down. There's been so few companies that have had good earnings, good outlooks. And so this is kind of one of those, you might as well. But a lot of these layoffs aren't truly necessary, which is, and in my opinion, I think that's kind of the garbage CEO that you're starting to see, is that we've had CEOs that don't know how to lead companies during a downturn. And so they're doing whatever investors in their ears are telling them to. And so it's a lot of share price. And when they were listening to long-term investors, they were talking about, you have to invest in growth. You have to, find ways to grow long-term. They cycle out right before these types of downturns happen. And a short-term investor comes in, and the short-term investor doesn't care about anything past 12 to 18 months. And so that's why you're seeing some layoffs that don't make any sense at some companies. And then you have other companies like Amazon, who's revisiting strategy. They're looking at unprofitable business units and saying, okay, this is a long-term bet, but is this really a smart way to spend money right now? Is this how we should be spending money given the way that the downturn's happening? And they're downsizing robotics because they're looking at that and saying, that's probably further out and not as profitable. And so we can come and revisit that later. And so there's some intelligent layoffs, but there's other ones that are just, they don't make any sense.
Sunker or Russell, any input? Kosub, what's going on? Kosub's in the building with a comment, because he's a robotics guy, crying face down, so is robotics. But Sunker or Russell, go for it.
Just one quick point. You were saying, a lot of the companies that are making these layoffs, they're high scale tech companies. So the people that are laying off are, good quality people. So they shouldn't have difficulty getting employment elsewhere. The one contrary point to that, though, is the scale. So the amount of people that are being laid off at each company, and then there's multiple companies that are being laid off. So there's an awful lot of people hitting the market at once. Is there enough other companies looking to hire to take them all on? I mean, I doubt it in one fell swoop, but as Vin was saying, it's probably going to be a tough 9 months. Over that 9 months and beyond, hopefully there is enough to absorb those people back into the market at a place that's stable for them, so that they can make their next play, their next move, and find stable employment going on. Because if the market is unstable, it can be tempting just to take the next soonest thing and skip from contract to contract. So yeah, it's a tough choice. I feel for everyone out there.
Yeah, I'm wondering what this means for one, like tech salaries. Like, are tech salaries inflated? Do you think that like the amount people getting paid is it realistic? And is this going to mean some type of leveling off for people going forward? Any thoughts on that, anyone?
One quick point back on that. I'd have thought, if anything, that they're likely to go up, because if people are being cut out, and especially if the employers have, they've seen a little bit of frostbite in their big toe and they've cut their whole leg off, then they're going to need to employ people back to make up for the shortfall that they got rid of, and they're going to have to employ people at a higher rate because they've either just been cut off, or they're bringing consultants from external who know what's happened, and they're going to demand higher rates anyway. I think this is likely, if anything, to inflate the market rates. What do you guys think?
So here from Sunker's got a good comment there in the chat. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just commenting on Vin's point. I thought Vin talking about it as a sort of like a market behavior. Apologies for the noise in the background, but if you really think about these things like financially, right? It's like in downturns like this, there's always people who just follow the trend and follow what everyone else is doing, meaning that, to Vince's point, there are CEOs who are overreacting, going too far, maybe to course correct. And as a result, that's potentially where there's a lot of opportunity, right? When you have a market that's stable, that's typically when you have everyone is at the same sort of level playing field. But when the markets are tumultuous, that's also an opportunity in some sense for some people to maybe double down on certain bets or maybe pick up some talent that's being overlooked. Just want to throw out that angle, but
Thank you very much. Question coming in here on LinkedIn from Mike Nash. Good to see you again, Mike. As a data professional, what is the best way to mitigate being sacked? As Ben said, do you have to try to get them to notice the value or dependency on you? Ben, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I think it's really understanding how you map to defensible value within the organization. I think sometimes people don't finish that last mile. If data scientists want to defend their activity or how a model's working, they'll defend it with metrics tied to activity rather than metrics tied to KPIs or ROIs. The classic example I give is like an AUC score versus how much money are you actually bringing back into the business. A lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people are not attached to revenue. They don't have a clear number that they can defend for the quarter. The other thought too, sometimes there's these natural tensions that exist. So in an environment like this, people really focus more on efficiency. So they'll pull back on innovation. And some of those things are really, really hard to defend in this environment, which is unfortunate.
Vin, Russell, Sankar, any comments on this? By the way, those of you watching on LinkedIn, feel free to drop in questions, and you in the chat. Love to hear from either Vivian or China Zoran. If I'm saying your name wrong, please let me know. Or CodeStep, go for it.
Yeah, adding on to what Ben was saying, having defensible space around your team means having a really good pitch deck for cost savings, improved productivity, and revenue generation. And just have that ready. 3 slides, 1 slide for each one of those main points. And if you can't make the mapping, that's a big problem, because somebody is going to come asking you in the next 6 months, what are we doing with all this revenue? What are we doing with all of this money that we're redirecting back into the data team? And so if you find yourself unable to fill up those 3 slides, the best thing to do now is look at initiatives with really short time horizons, where over the next 1 to 2 months, you can get some wins on the book. Because a lot of long-term initiatives, you can incrementally monetize. And that, if you can use that as sort of your mantra, long-term big wins, but incremental monetization. So make incremental progress and incremental monetization. And think of that in the roadmap form. Really just think of it as milestones. How much can we deliver in 14 days? And what's the revenue? What's the cost savings? What's the productivity? What can we do in 30 days? What can we do in 60 days? And really break it down that way. And if you can't do something in 2 weeks, move on. So that's the defensible space is what I call it, but there's a lot of different terms for it. Making a small defensible space around you and justifying why do we do data? And if you can find some people at the product management level, they're usually really good advocates, because they'll help you find these. They're looking for ways to save their job just as much as you are. Mm-hmm. So talk to people at product. If you can talk to somebody in the strategy side, they're the ones who are deciding who's getting laid off and who isn't right now. So if you can find some allies in the strategy team, and maybe even just help them, give them data that they need to understand how all the organizations are, do some data gathering and start saying, hey, we got some gaps here that I can help you fill, so that you understand how these other business units are producing value, or even help business units defend their value. So there's there's opportunities to create that defensible space.
Ben says in March 2020, most people did big cuts. I knew an exec that did the opposite and started hiring more salespeople to understand and expand their market share. That unusual strategy ended up working out very well for them. It's an interesting strategy. Ben now has to take his kid to the orthodontist. Speaking of orthodontist, I have to get a root canal redone, which is like, yeah, there's a canal that was missed, and I was getting a lot of swelling and pain right in here, and I could not understand why. I was in constant discomfort, and it turns out that the first root canal, they missed a canal, so now I got to go back and get that done. That's not going to be enjoyable. Vivian, what's going on? Good to see you.
Hey.
Hey.
I still have a job, by the way, if you were wondering.
Good.
So, yay.
You're too invaluable. I wouldn't fire you ever.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. I was pretty nervous though. I mean, one cannot help but like count all the ways, in your mind. You start being like, well, I don't know what their criteria are. I don't know how they're deciding this. It was very nerve-wracking.
Do you want to talk about that, or is that something that's probably just best to keep off the radar?
What do you mean?
Just that like that the criteria thing? I don't know if that's something that you're able to reverse.
They haven't shared that much about it. It was mostly strategic, like as far as like over like a higher level company strategy, I guess. Like there's been a lot of like Q&As and stuff, which has been helpful, but they basically just listed people were like, hey, how did you decide? And then it was like they basically just listed like all the things, like, oh yeah, we like considered strategy of the company, and we considered like blah blah blah, we considered performance, and we considered seniority, and like just like threw everything out. So it was like, okay, well, I don't know, they considered everything, I guess. I don't know.
I wonder if like in these processes, like how bad, like being maybe slightly abrasive in your personality could be towards getting laid off, or not, maybe not abrasive, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like just like strong opinions type of I wonder if that's something to worry about. Question coming here from well, actually we'll take the question from Russell, and then Sarga on LinkedIn, I see you there. I will get to your question as well, so go ahead and sit tight. Russell, go for your question.
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet. So I was saying, I wonder if there's a covert risk here in the data communities, being that there's been a long hard slog to get the wider business community to understand data as a product and later an asset. And we're not quite there yet, although it's getting better all the time. But is there a risk that once the purse strings are being tightened due to what's happening with these layoffs and wider economic climates globally, that the thing least understood at the moment is the first thing to be discounted for what seems like safer ground? It seems good, but I don't understand it yet. So let's put that away and go back to the abacus. Do you know what I mean?
Again, turn this one over to Vin. He's my resident expert on this type of stuff. I'm still sitting here just trying not to get laid off. Vin, go for it.
Me too. My boss is a jerk guy. So it's two streets, and Ben kind of nailed it. He said that, and this is something that happened in 2008, 2009. Look at all the companies that showed up in 2013 to 2017 and just crushed the building. They all invested in innovation and in appropriate staffing, really cycling out people that they didn't need anymore and filling roles more strategically with people that they did need for growth. Those companies came out and crushed. And so there are companies right now that are thinking that way. They're looking for opportunities. They're thinking predatorially. I mean, I'm sitting in strategy planning meetings where it's back. The predatorial way of thinking is really back. It's, how can we take market share? Who are we putting out of business in order to help us grow next year? It's the strategists are 100% back running the building. And in companies where the data team has made an impact on the C-suite, where the C-suite understands data has been, huge in helping them avoid some sort of Titanic type disaster. They're doubling down because they understand during uncertainty, you want data and you want better data. And so they'll cut other areas before they cut the data team. But the opposite's happening too. It's like you're saying, Russell, there are places where data team just haven't really gotten traction. And there's 100 reasons for it, but the data team just hasn't gotten traction. No one's seen it. No one gets it. No one's bought in. And, when you said, Harpreet, the abrasive personality, there've been strategists, knives out, that have been waiting for a chance to take a lop off the technology team that's been running things that they used to run. And so in some businesses, they're going to cut way too much and they're going to come out in 2 years and just be gone. That's the scary thing, is we're moving so fast. If you're not innovating right now, you're done. So a lot of these layoffs are going to really hurt the company. And yeah, there's some strategy behind it in smart companies, but in a lot of companies, there's just going to be this knee-jerk reaction.
Vivian, go for it.
I feel like I keep thinking about at work, like I joined this FANG world and like it's all about impact all the time, impact. And I feel that's kind of the question that's being asked here, is like, how do I create impact such that my work is considered invaluable, or that I can like prove my worth? So at work, at least for me, the way that I sort of think about impact is that the most valuable impact that has the greatest hit and is the most meaningful is like the further out in the future you can be. So like if you're impacting like mission and strategy, like future decisions, like way out there, like 6 months, even a year, like out there, then that's like the biggest impact, because you're like helping to steer that ship, and like helping to like be that voice of like helping make product decisions, versus like something more operational of like, oh well, our process is efficient, like then and you take those measurements and do some analysis with that, like that's not valuable. But like what's going to have the greatest hit is like if you can be like out there in the future, making like clearing the path for like where we should go next and like what our strategy should be.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. And in some ways that makes me feel kind of good, because in DevRel, being in this position, like half my foot is like here in the present now, how to kick up enough dust, dirt, commotion, and I don't want to say signal. I'm not a fan of I don't want to say noise. I'm not a fan of making noise. I'm a fan of broadcasting signal. How much signal can I broadcast? And then also like, where are we heading? Where am I steering this thing? Great insight. Thank you, Vivian. From Sarga on LinkedIn. She's pursuing a master's in information technology and management with specialization in the data science track, graduating in December, in just a few weeks here. Actively looking for full-time opportunity as a data analyst and business analyst. How's the job market for new grads in data analytics right now? I feel like my answer would be so different from just 2-3 months ago. Well, I mean, let's touch on that. What are some of your projections? Go for it, Vivian.
Well, I was thinking about this a little bit when you guys were talking earlier about layoffs and making some predictions there. That recessions are like hardest for the people, that are new in their careers. And like, I mean, if we're being honest here, I mean, sure, we can try to like find the silver linings and stuff. And one of those silver linings being like, you are not alone. Like there's a whole cohort of people out there, like, when you're experiencing hardship of like trying to find a job during a recession, like you can know assuredly that you are not alone. And that's can be really comforting. And, but there's also like a real truth here that like, for instance, I graduated college like during the peak of like when, the Great Recession, the 2008 recession and stuff was going on. And like being real, like I will never make up those losses. Like my career was forever set on like a lower trajectory, and like they like studies have shown that like once that happens that you really never close the gap. Like you just it like that's part of like one of the reasons of like millennial generation not being able to like afford housing and blah 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 is because like there just is a realistic like once you get started on this lower track, then you're just on a lower track. Like, and I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty happy where I am now. Like, I've managed to get a job at Meta and everything, and I've survived this layoff, thank goodness. And like, I'm happy about that. But like, realistically, like, I lost out on a lot of like great experience. You know, I might have gotten here much sooner. I might have like been making a lot of money in the meantime. I might have, you know, had a higher salary that then I could continue to demand a higher salary like throughout my whole career. Like there's like real losses here that like the people, you know, if we're really heading into a big recession and stuff, I'm like mourning the, you know, this cohort of like people graduating and stuff. Like I feel you. I feel your pain. I know what this is like. I'm sorry. Like there, you know, we can talk about silver linings all day, but it's never going to change the fact that like your life is always going to be different, like because of just your age and like the unfortunate alignings of, you know, when you graduate and stuff.
Sunker, let's hear from you. Go for it.
Yeah, I want to first of all think, yeah, what Vivian said makes a ton of sense. I guess one way I like to think about things like this is in terms of like opportunity costs. So a lot of times people are talking about, you know, the decision to pursue, you know, graduate studies versus take a job in terms of opportunity cost, right? And so a big reason that people don't get PhDs is because they think the opportunity cost of not going into industry is it's too high, right? But now that the economic climate has changed, that sort of calculus itself has changed. Now it makes a lot more sense to really invest in education, whether it's through graduate studies or through like a role, right? A non-traditional role that isn't like labeled as sexy data scientist, sexy data analyst. Like it could be just a marketing analyst or some other kind of analyst where you touch on data, you have an opportunity to make like optimizations to a business. You have the opportunity to take some like responsibility of some part of the business. I think that's super underrated, and it's like all extremely valuable, especially at a point like this where you really have nothing to lose, right? So it would make sense now more than ever to really look at that equation and see what makes sense right now for you.
Yeah, I graduated my first undergrad like 2007, and you know that was right during that Great Recession. And then the second degree I got, the graduate degree, was like 2012, 2013-ish. So like was kind of left school in two downturns. It really did have an effect, like 100%. So just to clarify, when you say like Vivian, when you say like lower track, that means like economy wise, or lower track in what sense?
Well, you know, because this is a thing even with like women too, of like why it's so hard to like close the pay gap is because when you make less money and then you go into a new job, then like, you know, and that's why a lot of states are trying to like make it illegal and stuff to ask for a previous salary, because they'll base your new salary based on your previous salary. But, you know, even when they don't ask, it's still kind of like a, you know, still an anchoring point. And then even just in general, like it can change expectations of like what the company expects people to like pay people. You know, it kind of like changes that trajectory of like salaries going up based on your experience and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Ben says new and junior talent is going to be impacted the most. So Sarga, hopefully that doesn't demotivate you too much, but you know there might be some light at the end of the tunnel for you. Vin, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to give some quick advice. Industry. There are recession resilient industries. Casino gaming is one of them. And casino gaming is, I mean, when it swings down hard and you get laid off So it's not the best industry in the world, but you want to look at things like casino gaming or traditional online gaming, companies like Blizzard and Activision Blizzard and Take-Two and all of those. Some are doing better than others. And that's the other thing. Pick companies that are succeeding versus the competition. Those companies will continue to hire and they'll be safer havens. They'll likely be hiring junior talent a whole lot longer because they have a different growth plan, a different outlook on growth. But you're going to be going into a way more competitive marketplace. And so find something about you that's awesome, because everybody has something amazing about them. Everybody has an advantage over other people. Something happened in your life or some series of experience and education combined where you have natural talents, whatever it is, figure out what that is and market the heck out of it. Make that your superpower, where it is, I'm a data scientist and this other thing. And because of that, I can do all these other things and get so good that your value proposition is undeniable, because there will be opportunity. There'll be a whole lot less of it. There'll be a whole lot more, rigor in the vetting and even just getting in the front door, but figure out what your advantage is and market it. I mean, just relentlessly always be marketing yourself.
There's a question coming in from Mike, which we'll get to your question, Mike. But there's a question that came after from Akmel side. If you guys don't know Akmel, follow him on LinkedIn. A lot of great content. We did a live session a few weeks back. I think you can find that on my YouTube as well. And I think what Vin just said speaks to this question. How does one differentiate themselves if they have no formal experience in the field, minus the general advice of projects? There's only so many data sets out there, and I think what Vin just said is exactly how you do it. Yeah. And any other input on that from anyone else? And then also see there's a question here from China Zor. We'll get to your question as well. But any other tips or advice on that? How does one differentiate themselves if they have no formal experience? Like Vin 100% agree with that. I mean, go deep into something, right? I love this phrase. Know something about everything and everything about something, which is exactly what Vin is saying. Be like, yeah, I'm a data scientist, but I'm also this other thing. So just talent stack and combine skills and do it in a way that is really, authentic to you and your interests, because you're just gonna be that much more excited about it, that much more interested in it. But I think if you go around trying to assemble those skills in a way that's kind of geared towards, I just want to find a way to make money from it, you probably won't go deep enough into anything or be excited about it as much. So yeah, the term is specific knowledge. I think gather specific knowledge. Vivian.
I think that also there's something to be said for like crafting your story and like being honest about it. I feel like something that really helped me is I felt like a sense of embarrassment about like certain ways that I got to where I am, and so I was like trying to like be evasive, or like you could feel kind of that energy coming off me of like, I'm embarrassed to answer this question or something, because I know that it's like I feel inferior to like other people who have more traditional backgrounds or something. But instead, like I feel like I finally started succeeding when I got out of my own way and started like owning it, of like, yeah, I am untraditional and here's like why that makes that great, like here's like why I have a different perspective than somebody else, and like that's meaningful, and like that's also where you're going to find like eventually you're going to find that employer that like values you and like your perspective, and it's going to be like a good fit on both ends. It's sort of like dating, like if you lie and if you like create this like paper person of like who you think you should be, then like you're going to end up with somebody who sucks and isn't a good match for you. But like when you're honest with yourself, it's and like honest with other people, like who you are and what makes you great, then like eventually it may take some time and maybe super frustrating and a lot of tears, but like eventually you'll find that fit and it will like magic.
Yeah, authenticity sort of comes down to dude, I can relate and resonate to exactly what you're saying so much. And it, I didn't own up to my story and failures until recently. I wrote that blog post almost a year ago. I thought failure was my destiny, and then I realized it made me who I am today, and it just felt good just putting it out there. And now I'm just like, I just own it. Like, yeah, fuck yeah, I was a failure. I was a yeah, I was a high school dropout junkie who wasted most of his 20s doing all sorts of things, and I'm surprised I haven't lost my mind yet. Yeah, I own it. But yeah, question here then from we'll go to Chinazor's question here first, then we'll go to Mike's question just because they are in the room right now. If you'd like to unmute, please feel free to unmute. If not, I think this might be more of a comment than a question. Still coming up in the field, but intentional about my growth, which maybe you want to join this session. Well, you're in the right place. Looking for some mentorship that will help carve a niche and progress in a higher pedestal. Well, yeah, this is the place to do it. Just to ask your questions, whatever questions you got, go for it. Sunker says here, finding communities. Talk to us about that. Finding communities. How is that a way to differentiate ourselves?
Yeah, so in terms of differentiating, it seems almost counterintuitive, right? Like you find a community and you're just another member of the community, but that's the hope. The goal is to find a community that is passionate, I think. And that's been the key for me, at least, to at least keep my morale up when you see all of this bad news, and whenever obviously you're not having a perfect week at work or your project is not going so well. It's just being part of something, and finding other people who are, I think passion is contagious. Like I think when you're with people who are really interested about something, that's when you'll also be interested, and then you bounce ideas, and then it has this reciprocal effect, right? Where you amplify each other, you grow together, you learn together. And I think that's like really underrated as far as like just growing as an individual. Is just people are at the end of the day what will make or break your life. So it makes a lot of sense to invest in having good people around you. We're just excited about life the same way you are.
Couldn't be an easier time to join communities than now. Like there weren't. I mean, there were communities like this when I was growing up, but not as is diversified the right word, or niche down, I guess is really the right word. Like if if you're just like interested in only one particular thing, like I'm just interested in the YOLO V7 model for this particular application, there's probably a community out there for that. So yeah, communities are definitely key. You can also check out Deep Learning Daily. It's a community I'm starting. Have started. And just going to read off some of the comments here before going to Mike's question. Russell says, honesty, authenticity, and not being an ass. Some of the best ways to differentiate, even when we see others behaving like asses, seem to prosper. I agree with that. Ben Taylor, network and storytelling can really help someone level up. I didn't realize the importance of both of those things early in my career. Yeah, I didn't appreciate networking really until very, very recently. Yeah, networking is super important. All right, cool. Let's go to the question. Yeah, create a personal brand. Let's go to the question by Mike here. Going forward, do you think the nature of employment is changing towards more shorter term contracts? Do we have to get used to this as a strategy going forward? It's interesting, like just like the gig economy type of thing. Do you think the gig economy will move from the typical types of things that we see on Fiverr to like more like high quality, high skilled type of work? I'm curious. Yeah. Yeah, the gig economy for really high skill. I mean, most of those jobs for the gig economy are high skill, but yeah, are we moving towards that? Shorter term contracts. I like this, but I would love to hear from other folks. Vin, go for it.
Yeah, I wrote a post last year, so I'm a little. I get to wave the banner here for a second. Yeah, I think decentralized teams, self-assembling teams are the future, because companies don't need the same thing long term anymore, and people evolve so fast when it comes to skills, capability, reskilling. Education's different now, and technology moves quickly. So somebody who was a data scientist in 2015 with that skill set is now a data analyst. And so we're moving so fast and businesses are changing so fast I think you'll see this decentralized model of work because somebody at Meta is going to need a completely different type of team than somebody doing data science at, Ford. And so somebody who did data science at Meta, did a gig at Google, will in 2 years be very valuable to somebody at Ford, to somebody at one of these other organizations in a different industry. And you can kind of see that progression of someone's career where they'll span maybe a 5 year doing similar things. And I think teams are going to become self-assembling, where you have these talent agencies now, or you try to assemble talent and hold on to it. Companies are really bad at upskilling, and they're really bad at creating training programs and figuring out, whereas individuals are far better at optimizing their education and their career path towards value because they're incentivized a little bit differently than companies are. So I think that's really where we go, is this concept of self-assembling teams, being able to validate and continuously validate your credentials as they evolve. And so not so much certifications, but almost micro certifications, I think are going to become the future of how we credential ourselves and how we get involved in a particular project, that we've gotten particular, credentials and experience and reviews. And a whole lot of the gig economy concepts I think are coming into, and this is probably one of the bigger decentralized platform type use cases, is talent, workforce engineering, and that sort of dynamic workforce engineering concept. I think that's where we're going. But how long it's going to take to get there, that's a big question, because companies don't like to change. And the whole HR concept scares them, because that's compliance, that's legal, that's liability, there's so many laws in place, and trying to go to a completely different model, there's regulations in place that'll slow it down.
Can you help me understand self-assembling teams? Like, does that mean like people just get together with a group of their friends or people that they work really well with, and they just do a bid for a particular assignment that pops up? Or am I understanding that right, or is there a different definition?
No, project geometry. If you have a particular work product that you need created, every work product has a dimensionality to it when it comes to capabilities required to create the work product. And so a lot of these are confidential. And so you can't put out the actual, this is what I need built, until everybody's under an NDA. And so what you'll end up seeing is, instead of the actual initiative or the project that you need, you'll see that dimensionality released as the specification. And so you'll need teams that meet that capability geometry or that project geometry. And when you have a team like that, it's just going to be self-assembling, where people will get recruited to fill in each one of those pieces in the most efficient way from a cost standpoint possible. Or if you're optimizing for time, or if you're optimizing for a particular level of quality, or certain capabilities are more important to you than others, that's going to dictate the team. And I don't think it's going to always be the same people working together. I think really self-assembling is going to be what's the optimal. And companies will be willing to pay different amounts. Some will not be willing to pay for top talent. And so you will get, that'll be part of the geometry, is what's your budget and what kind of talent can you get for that budget.
Project geometry, I like that term. Any follow-up thoughts on that? Hopefully, Mike, that answered your question. Vivian, go for it.
I can't help but feel like whenever anybody talks about gig economy, that the elephant in the room is like the American healthcare system, and like that it's tied to your employment. So like, I just don't like, personally, I don't know. I think that what Vin was saying sounds really cool and futuristic, but like that's definitely a blocker in my mind of like the gig economy really taking off, is because like people need healthcare and they'll demand it. And at some point, like there's certain situations with the gig economy where it starts to feel like a trap or a trick, and then people are like, okay, I'm never going to do that again. I'm now going to seek a regular FTE job with benefits and insurance and stuff.
I guess would it be plausible to think that for these type of gig economy jobs that the rate of pay would be higher, so that you could take a portion of that and maybe buy like your own kind of health insurance?
I mean, that would be nice if
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, I've read a lot of things on like the worker reform Reddit, subreddit, and like I don't know, I guess I just feel like it's a precarious situation in my mind, especially in the US with the healthcare. And like no, like the US is also the only like developed country that doesn't have mandated um like PTO and stuff, like mandated
Mhm.
time off. So I I just feel like it's a precarious situation in the US because like it's an easy way for companies to like slowly like inch forward to take advantage of their employees and stuff like that and treat people like crap. So I don't know. I think it is possible to have a gig like that that works well, but I think on a mass scale without like some reform, I just don't see it being like a big major thing on a wide
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah, valid points. So it'd be interesting to do like have a full time job and then pick up gigs on the side type of thing. I think that would be interesting kind of way to supplement income and whatnot. Good points. Thank you, Vivian. Any other questions or comments coming through? Let me know. Or anything anybody wants to talk about. I don't see anything coming up on the LinkedIn or the YouTube. I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up then. Shout out to everybody that's watching and everybody that smashed a like. I see y'all there on LinkedIn. Christina Stathopoulos, Greg, Matt McFarlane, Greg Hogg. If you guys don't know Greg Hogg, check him out. He's got a great YouTube channel. Does a lot of like deep learning architectures from scratch in computer vision stuff. Had a conversation with him just a couple days ago. Might have been yesterday. I don't remember. But yeah, check his videos out. Great guy. Looking forward to doing some with him in the near future. Cool, man. Well, I guess that's it. Let's be able to wrap it up. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks for being here. Looking forward to doing some more live streams. I got some interviews going off this weekend. Actually, I've got on Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time. I'm doing a interview with Varun Nair. Varun was a part of Data Science Dream Job with me. He's one of the students there. He wrote a book called Breaking Stereotypes, so we'll be talking to him about that. But by the time this is on the podcast, that will already have happened, so make sure you go back and listen to that. Then I'm interviewing on Tuesday Shang Huang. I actually met Shang in I think it was like right by Stanford University. We're at some dinner that Intel was putting together, and we're just chatting, and it was good meeting him. He has a YouTube channel that's all about mind mapping, which it was super fascinating, super interesting. He's also part of the new LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program. And then in next week, doing a live session with Jessica Iodelli. If you don't know her, look her up. She's huge on YouTube, Twitter, and looking forward to chatting with her. And then on the 29th, talking to Jessica Larson. She is a data engineer at, I believe it's Airbnb. So we'll be chopping it up, talking about her book. Grant Fleming, I'll be talking to him as well. He wrote the book Responsible Data Science. So yeah, few live streams coming up, interview type of thing, and then I gotta hibernate because the second baby's coming, and I'm gonna have to slow down the pace. But thank you all for being here. Appreciate all of you. Remember, my friends, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers.